Some things aren't meant to be opened. But loneliness doesn't ask permission. It was tucked behind the old atlas. The same one we used to plan our anniversary trip. No envelope. No name. Just his handwriting. I knew better. But my hands moved anyway. I wasn't looking for answers. Maybe just a sign. That something we had still remembered me. The first lines were simple. Too simple. But then, something shifted. The phrasing, the pauses. They weren't mine, but they didn't feel like hers either. I didn't stop. Not because I wanted to know, but because I already did. And what I found wasn't what I expected. He didn't leave in the middle of a storm. There was no slammed door. No suitcase packed in rage. He just left after breakfast. Said he'd take a walk before the heat came in. I nodded. Told him to bring water. That was the last thing I ever said to him. The kettle was still warm when I realized he was late. By lunch, I was staring at the driveway. By nightfall, I had convinced myself he was angry, or maybe trying to prove a point. But he didn't come back the next day, or the next. The porch light burned through 3 nights before the bulb gave out. I didn't replace it. I opened his drawer a week later. I don't know what I was looking for, a note, maybe. Or some clue that it was all a misunderstanding. But the drawer was empty. Too clean. Too intentional. That's when I saw the envelope. Tucked between 2 receipts. Cream-colored. Worn edges. Unsealed. I picked it up. Stared at the flap. Then I put it back. I wasn't ready. That might have been the betrayal before the betrayal. That I had the chance to know something, but chose not to. That I kept telling myself he'd return. That everything had an explanation waiting just outside the ache. I kept setting out his tea for 2 weeks. Earl Grey, 1 sugar. I sat across from his empty chair and told myself silence was temporary. But silence started to settle in like dust, soft at first. Then thick enough to cover everything. I called Dolores. She paused before answering. "He always runs," she said. Quiet. "You just didn't think you'd be one of the places he'd run from." I didn't answer. Her voice felt like it had already given up on him. Like she'd practiced this goodbye before. Friends brought casseroles, then stopped. Neighbors asked once. Then moved on. Even the dog next door seemed to bark differently, like something had shifted in the rhythm of the street. The world moved forward while I stood still, holding a space no one else could see. Weeks passed. Then months. I found myself checking the mail more than usual. Not because I expected a letter, but because I didn't know what else to do with my hands. He had taken almost nothing. No toothbrush. No jacket. His shoes were still under the bench. The ones he wore to the farmer's market every Saturday. He left them like he was planning to wear them again. But he also didn't leave a reason. And that was the hardest part. I would have forgiven him 1,000 reasons. Illness, fear, even selfishness. But he gave me nothing to fight with. Nothing to hold on to. Just a space I had to shape with guesses. That was the betrayal. Not that he left, but that he left me to write the ending alone. I started imagining worse things. Not to feel better, but to feel something. Maybe he died. Maybe he was in a clinic, forgetting my name. Maybe he met someone else. I rehearsed these stories late at night, like bedtime tales that never soothed. Once he had asked me, "Do you ever feel lonely, even when we're together?" I laughed. I thought it was a joke. I never answered. Maybe that was the first goodbye. Some days, I blamed myself. Other days, I blamed the quiet between us. Most days, I just wanted to know if he had ever planned to come back, or if I had simply misunderstood everything we ever were. And that letter in the drawer? It stayed there for years. Until one afternoon, without knowing why, I opened it. There were days I moved through the house like I didn't live there. I'd water plants I didn't care about. Fold towels I didn't plan to use. I swept the porch twice a day. Not because it needed it, but because it filled time between meals I ate without tasting. Some mornings I'd catch myself talking to his mug. Just small things. Well, you missed the mail again. Or, it's raining today. You used to say it made the tomatoes sweeter. Then I'd laugh. Then I'd cry. Then I'd laugh again. The kind of loop no one sees but feels like unraveling. I tried going to church. Saturday, in our usual pew, wore the scarf he gave me 3 birthdays ago. The woman next to me said, "It's good to see you smiling again." I wasn't smiling. I was holding my face still enough so it wouldn't fall apart. That night, I threw a picture frame, not in rage, just to hear something break that wasn't inside me. The glass shattered. I swept it up slowly. It was the only noise in the house that felt honest. He had a blue flannel I used to sleep in when I couldn't find him in the sheets. One night I pressed it to my face and couldn't smell him anymore. Just the scent of time, of cotton and dust. I cried for that too. I remember once, during dinner, he called me by his sister's name. "Dolores," he said, reaching for the salt. He didn't notice, but I did. I let it go. I always let small things go. I thought that was kindness. Maybe it was fear of what they meant, of what they confirmed. He asked me once, "Do you think we're still good at being us?" I changed the subject. I didn't want to hear his answer, or mine. I wasn't just grieving a man who left. I was grieving the years before that, where we slowly stepped further from each other, pretending the hallway didn't feel colder. Sometimes I imagined him walking through the door. No grand apology, just a nod. I pictured what I'd say. I practiced lines, sharp ones, forgiving ones, but in every version, I still ended up holding his hand. I bought a suitcase once, left it by the front door. I didn't pack it. I just wanted to remember I had options. I needed to see that even choosing to stay was still a choice. Once, during a thunderstorm, I left the house without saying anything. I walked until the rain soaked through my shoes. He never mentioned it. Maybe he understood. Maybe we both knew how to disappear without slamming anything. We were quiet people, but not always gentle ones. I wrote him a letter in the 3rd month. 4 pages. Poured everything I couldn't say into ink. I signed it, folded it, then tucked it into the drawer beneath the sink, next to old coupons and a rubber band that no longer stretched. That drawer became a graveyard of unsaid things, and I visited it often. People stopped asking. Friends avoided the topic like it was contagious. Dolores sent a card on my birthday. No return address. The porch light stayed dark. His shoes stayed under the bench, and I stayed. Not because I was weak, but because leaving would have meant admitting he was never coming back. I had seen that envelope before. That was the part that shook me most. Years ago, during a late spring cleaning, I had picked up the Betty Crocker cookbook, and a letter slipped out. I had barely glanced at it. The first words blurred before I could read. My chest tightened, my fingers folded it shut, and I tucked it back where it fell. I wasn't ready then. Maybe I didn't want to know. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe an old grocery list. An unfinished recipe. Something he jotted down and forgot. But part of me knew, and part of me chose silence. Until yesterday. Something about the afternoon felt hollow. I reached for that cookbook again, not for a recipe, but for the weight it held. The envelope was still there, thin and faded. I held it longer this time. My hands were steadier, my breath slower. I opened it, to the one I never made peace with. No name, just that. But the words felt personal, too personal. He wrote about guilt that woke him at night. The silence between them. A memory of a birthday missed because of something trivial like a flat tire. He wrote of a blue sweater they argued over. He called it stupid, then added, "But I carried the weight of that fight longer than I should have." I blinked at that line. We had fought once over something just as small, a chipped mug, I think. He had stormed out, left for 2 days, came back, without a word. For years I thought that was the day everything began to unravel. But the letter wasn't about me. He wrote, "I thought staying away would be kinder. I didn't know how to show up broken. That line landed hard. Because once, he had told me the same, almost word for word. But I thought he had said it to escape, to disappear without responsibility. I reread it, slowly. He never used names in letters. I remembered that now, not when feelings were involved. It was always, you, or dear one, or nothing at all. It made things feel intimate, even when they weren't meant to be. The more I read, the more I realized this wasn't for me. It was for someone else. Dolores, his sister. They hadn't spoken in years. I remembered her vaguely, a small frame, dark hair, the smell of cinnamon. She sent us a gift, one sea scarf he never wore. And yet, even knowing it was for her, I couldn't look away, because everything he wrote echoed in me, as if I had waited my whole life to hear someone say these things, even if it wasn't meant for me. I stood at the window and watched a breeze stir the hydrangeas. He used to call them stubborn flowers, said they bloomed in spite of everything. I thought he meant the soil. Now I wondered if he meant me. The letter stayed on the table. I didn't move it right away. I sat beside it, not touching, just letting it exist. Then I remembered something I hadn't in years. I had written him a letter once. The week after he left. 3 pages. I never sent it. I didn't know where to. I kept it folded in a drawer with old birthday cards and fabric swatches. It was still there. I had read it once every year on the same day, then folded it away again. 2 letters. One never sent. One never meant for me. But both necessary. Not for explanation, not for blame, but to unstick something that had hardened in me. I went to the drawer and took out my letter. I laid it next to his. 2 shapes of silence sitting side by side. And I understood something then. We were never good at speaking what mattered. We used gestures, coffee refills, packed lunches, doors held open too long. We used weather reports and small talk. We loved in quiet, messy ways. Maybe this letter, though not for me, was the only way he could say what he never managed in person. And maybe reading it now, after all these years, meant I was finally ready to receive it. I folded both letters together and placed them in the tin box where I kept things I didn't know how to let go of. A matchbook from our first date, a button from his favorite coat, a faded note he once left taped to the fridge that simply said, "Back soon." I sat again at the window, tea cooling in my hands. The silence wasn't empty. It was just full in a softer way. I didn't burn the letter. I didn't tuck it into a book and leave it somewhere for someone else to find. That might have made for a prettier ending, but I wasn't after poetry. I wanted truth. I took the letter and laid it flat on the kitchen table. The same table where we once shelled peas in spring, where we argued without raising voices, where I once sat for 3 hours after he didn't come home. I read the letter again, slower this time. He wrote, "I thought staying away would be kinder." I paused. My fingers hovered above the words. Then, without hesitation, I crossed that sentence out. A single line through the middle. Not angry, not spiteful, just clear. It wasn't kinder. Not for me. That was the only mark I made. I folded the letter gently, placed it in the tin box where I kept the parts of us that mattered. The matchbox car, the dried petal, the photo with the corner torn. I didn't add my letter, the one I wrote him months ago. I took it out, reread it, and tore it in half. He had said what he needed to say, in his way. And I had said mine, alone, to paper. I didn't need the echo anymore. Justice for me wasn't about being heard. It was about no longer whispering to myself. That night, I didn't light the porch. I didn't check the mailbox. I didn't reach for his mug. I sat with my tea, no sugar this time, and watched the steam rise slow and soft. The shoes under the bench were still there. I didn't move them. I just stopped waiting for them to be filled. That morning, I opened the curtains before the sun reached them, just to see the day begin. The light came slow, soft, like it wasn't sure if it was welcome, but I let it in. I brewed tea, not because I had to, because I wanted to taste something warm again. I reached for the tin where I kept the good leaves, not the ones for guests, the ones I hadn't touched since he left. I wiped the lid clean, chose a blend he never liked, just for me. At the table, I unfolded a fresh grocery list. For the first time in months, I wrote it in ink. The chair across from me was still empty, but I didn't brace for it this time. I looked at it. Let it be empty. Let it belong to no one. Then came a knock. It was Lily, from next door. A crumpled drawing in her hand. "I made this," she said. "It's you. And the porch light. And the sky." I smiled. "Is the sky always that color?" She nodded. "Today it is." Ugh. She sat beside me on the porch swing, legs kicking, voice humming something she never finished. I didn't speak. I just let the sound of her take up space where silence used to sit. Later, after she left, I stood in the doorway a long time. The porch light was still off. I hadn't replaced the bulb. I didn't need to. The house had found morning on its own. If you've been carrying a letter no one's ever read, a goodbye never given, a memory folded too long, I hope you know, not all letters bring peace. Some just sit quietly beside your grief until it stops needing to speak. You don't have to answer it. You don't even have to finish reading. But maybe, just maybe, you can write something back, even if no one sees it. I kept mine, tucked it in the drawer by the window, the same one where the light falls soft each morning, just enough for one empty chair and a cup I still make for two. Some mornings don't knock. They just come in, and you realize you were never waiting for someone. You were waiting to stay.